Kerbifer plushies are now available from the fine folks at Makeship, and the link's seen here on screen and in the video description. You've got a little under 2 weeks left to buy them, so get them while they're still puntable! Woo! This Kirblog topic was suggested by Kirilu Stromboli. If you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before they release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. Whatever, however, we make Kirblogs together. I record them on Discord, and hopefully you will enjoy them. Well, here we are. It's that time again, folks, where you're going to be hearing my AC in the background because it's friggin' hot in LA right now. We are right in the midst of a disgusting summer. It literally went from being nice and gloomy to melting my skin off. So I do apologize if the AC is noticeable. Forgive me for that. But nonetheless, and yeah, Shakira I felt was appropriate for summer. So I don't know. So this is a cool one. This is you guys have had so many cool suggestions for these monthly Kirblog topics as of late. So Curly Stromboli asked on Patreon, maybe you could talk about rabbit holes you've gone down and the discoveries you're glad you made when you went down them. He gave examples such as getting into Ninjala and listening to city pop songs and stuff. And yeah, I have quite a few because I suppose in a certain sense, this is, I guess kind of in tandem with the rabbit holes that I've been down. It also kind of comes down to like what my experience of being on the internet for so long has brought me. Because I've basically been on the internet for about 25 years at this point, exploring different things and finding all sorts of nonsense. And for as far back as I can remember, I have in fact been kind of going down rabbit holes on the interwebs. So I kind of set up a little bit of a chart here for the different eras of my life over the years. And in recent years, it went down a little bit in terms of like, how much crazy intrigue there was. But throughout my childhood and my teenage years and into my early 20s, there were quite a few interesting little things that a lot of which I'm sure probably won't come as a surprise to people necessarily in terms of what my tastes are. But starting in the late 90s, when I first got my hands on the internet, and I mean, my God, I don't even remember, or it must have been like, I was a baby. It was probably before I even had, it was probably right before I made my first AOL Instant Messenger screen name, which of course is, as many people know, the origin of where Kirbifer came from when I was 12 years old. But I think before that, I recall going on websites as a young kid and, looking for my first kind of, I guess, rabbit hole that I ever really dove into was looking up cheat codes. I believe this might have been maybe before stuff like GameFAQs. I don't remember what year GameFAQs came into existence, but I was just looking up like cheat codes and different things like that. Just like any kind of, I used to collect strategy guides quite a bit when I was a kid. But sometimes there'd be certain games that just wouldn't get stuff like that. So I'd try to find like just any other information on the internet that I possibly could in order to help me out with certain games that I might have been kind of crappy at. And there were some old kind of rudimentary, Mario fan sites, probably like GeoCities and Angel Fire type stuff. In the days before Wix and Portfolio Box and, Tumblr and all sorts of, things like that, where now it's easy to make a website. Back then it was kind of stuff like that where, it was really... really basic HTML or whatever it was kind of things. But also, funnily enough, the earliest websites, and hardcore Tome fans might know this, but the earliest websites that I went on, and I kind of dove into various rabbit holes when it came to those, were actually the ones that kind of led to the creation of the Net Kings in Tome. Those earliest sites involve... Super Mario 128 Central, which was, it's still around actually to this day, and it was the site that infamized, because this was back when photoshopping stuff was not as easy to do, so it was a little, you had a lot more leeway to actually fool people with April Fool's jokes like this, but it was the site that popularized the L is Real 64, like you can unlock Luigi and Mario 64 website. That was kind of its big claim to fame, was that. And I got duped by several April Fool's jokes from that website, unfortunately. I recall Kirby's Rainbow Resort was a Kirby site that I went on to, which of course Kinder Spirit was based on because she was actually one of the members of the staff of that site, as a matter of fact. And then there was Game Trailers was a big one. I think that's actually kind of going into the early 2000s even, but that was another. The early days of back when it was Daizenshuu EX before it became Kanzenshuu EX as it is now. And I think even the early days of Cerebi too, if I'm not mistaken. So those were kind of the first sites, but it wasn't like diving too deep. It was more so just like exploring the internet and just kind of opening my brain up to the idea of, oh, there's all this information on these websites that I can go to and learn about these things that I didn't know about, all my favorite things. So going into the early 2000s, a lot of the following ones were kind of all around the same time, and they were very big turning points for me. I can recall learning more about the Japanese version of the Pokemon anime, particularly its opening themes. I had found some websites that had, I'll never forget, my mind was blown when I played a lot of Pokemon Pinball. And there was a theme that would play, if any of you guys have played the original Game Boy Pokemon Pinball, on the blue board. When you would get into the catching a Pokemon mode on the blue Pokemon pinball board, it would play this theme that I didn't recognize from another Pokemon thing. It was and I'm like, I don't know what this tune is. I don't recognize it from the games, but it sounds great. And then I found on just some website, I found a MIDI back when I used to collect MIDI files of what seemed to be an arrangement of that theme playing, or what I thought was. And then finally, I found some webs. Okay, back in the day, long before YouTube was around, hosting video files was not the easiest thing in the world to do, necessarily. So a lot of people that would host video files would have them as these tiny-ass, like, real media player type things that were... like just these really low quality video files, like just all bit crushed and not great audio quality either. But I'll never forget the day that I found a site that had video files, very, very highly compressed video files of what was up to that point all of the Japanese Pokemon opening animations, and I learned for the first time all of the opening themes to the Japanese version of Pocket Monsters. And when I finally heard what turned out to be Mizase Pokemon Master, or Aim to be a Pokemon Master, and it starts singing, and I'm like, that's what that theme is. Of course. Okay, so finally, like, that was a big sort of thing opened up to me. And then, as I was listening to the others, I was realizing the third opening, which was, I think it's okay. It's the golden smile and silver tears, do. And I'm like, oh, I have heard this theme because there's an instrumental version of it that plays in the Johto seasons. So, and same thing with the advanced generation. So hearing lyrical versions of these songs was like the most incredible, and this is like Gen 3 was new at the time. It was like the most incredible thing in the freaking world to me when I got to hear these things. I was like, oh my God, this is my life right now. And, cause of course that was still like, not that I haven't stopped being obsessed with Pokemon, but that was like childlike obsession with it still, after Gen 1 and 2, had encapsulated my entire existence. And then there was, again, kind of in that same period of time, there was learning deep lore closer to the Japanese source material when it came to Dragon Ball. And a big reason for that in particular was because of Daizenshuu EX at the time, again, which has now become Kanzenshuu. That was when I was starting to learn more about kind of like what I was missing and what I was not knowing about in regards to like some of the subtle differences in how the Dragon Ball characters are written and how they were executed, and how the dub was very changed, even though it was claiming to be uncut. This is, of course, long before Kai. And also, that was kind of in tandem with me falling in love, similarly with the Pokemon thing, the Dragon Ball Z openings and Japanese endings. In fact, actually, that was also, I found the midis of those prior to actually listening to the full song. So I would listen to Chala Head Chala and Dan Dan Kokoro Hikara Teku and all that stuff in MIDI form, and I was learning the lyrics and stuff. So that all kind of fed into my fascination with the Japanese side of Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball was the first anime that, like, I wanted to learn stuff about the Japanese version from when I was becoming really obsessed with that end of things, because it felt like this magical thing to me. And I'll come back to that when it comes to anime a little bit later on. Although I will say, similar, around the early 2000s was also when I was learning, I mentioned briefly about changing things with Dragon Ball, but on a more extreme side, and this is funny because I've been listening quite a bit to the 4Kids Flashback podcast, which if you guys have not listened to, you should. It's a really, really interesting podcast. But 4Kids censoring a lot of their Saturday morning anime shows, I was learning much more about what was being done to Yu-Gi-Oh! About, even there were some shows that, Mega Man NT Warrior, how that was being censored by Viz, and, a lot of these anime that I was watching on TV and how they were being changed, by the American, companies and everything. And finding a lot of websites that would actually chronicle, how they were changing things and how they were changing names and what the original intention was, and having kind of comparison little clips and things like that, all sorts of stuff like that, more or less. I was kind of learning slowly but surely about all of that sort of stuff. And of course, because by that point I was becoming an early teenager. I think that would have been probably my 13 or 14 kind of age of years. That was kind of opening up my perspective about what anime is as an art, but also just being an angry teenager of they're ruining my shows, they're changing the stuff, and of course, because everybody kind of goes through a phase like that. Although now I bet kids don't even have to deal with that anymore. Not really, because there's little to no shows that actually do that kind of censorship anymore, which is nice. Thankfully, that's kind of mostly gone away at this point. Another thing as well, and this, of course, a lot of people know about me, so I won't spend too much time about this. But another big obsession and rabbit hole that I went down with in the early 2000s was when I went to TV Tome and met all the people that would eventually become the bases of the Tome characters from that point forward. On TV Tome, for those of you who don't know, so TV Tome, which was the site where I met all of the other, it was the place where I met my first online friends that became the bases of the Tome characters that you know now. That website, which no longer exists, it was a kind of a pre-Wikipedia sort of database website. And it had articles about every single movie and TV show, and I think even some video games, if I'm not mistaken, that had ever been made. And people had gone ahead and made articles of staff, writers, directors, and actors as well. And this website is the place where I finally, and because this is such a part of my DNA, for Christ's sake, it is the place where my obsession with voice actors and voice acting trivia and how voice acting works and industry stuff, that is the place where it started. Because of the fact that they had these articles where they just listed, Tom Kenny, who is the voice of Dog from Cat Dog and SpongeBob and all these other things. And I realized, okay, and then I got so obsessed with that. And I started to kind of chronicle and log in who all these actors were in my head. And then that was kind of me slowly building up that actor is also the guy that does this voice in this other show that I'm watching right now. And that's where it began, and it changed me for life. And it was all because I was reading incessantly all these pages and memorizing this information about all this different stuff, about all these anime and video games and TV shows and movies that I was watching and everything at the time. And it was like a crack addiction to me at the time. It was just crazy. And then that, of course, then expanded further into me looking up, behind the scenes stuff. Eventually, when YouTube became a thing and they were uploading stuff like that, and going to conventions and going to panels and meeting some of these actors, buying the DVDs, which had a lot of the behind the scenes like commentaries about like how this stuff worked and everything. That was that. So all of that kind of was the same rabbit hole of learning about the professional voiceover industry, and particularly, I guess, the dubbing industry for doing anime and stuff. It all started in that little point. I think that would have been around 2002 or 3 on TV Tome, and because of all the articles on that website about all those actors and all those different people and everything. And of course, also around that same time, and this is another like very expected one, was Newgrounds. I had seen other Flash animation posted around various places before that. I had seen like Joe cartoon stuff. I'd seen Homestar Runner, a bunch of these different things. And then eventually I learned about Newgrounds. And in those days, it was all about Legendary Frog and the Zerbs brothers and the Super Flash brothers, Egoraptor, a lot of the really early folks that were doing things there. In fact, actually, I'll even have at the end of this, there was a Kirblog that I did with a lot of those old school Newgrounds guys that I got to know, and we kind of talked about that those early days of Newgrounds and everything. So I'll spare you that if you want to go listen to that one. I'll have it as an annotation at the end of the end of this video. But that was a fun time, and of course, the rest. I got obsessed with that. Then I picked up Flash. I learned how to do animation. I became the nut job that I am today in terms of making my animation stuff and everything. So but that was the kind of first. Those were all of the first kind of major rabbit holes that I dove into on the internet from the late 90s to the early 2000s. So moving into the mid to late 2000s, the next sort of thing, there were quite a few. This is actually in big part thanks to Colin Nylock, the guy that Nylock was based on that I went to middle school and high school with. So Colin, if you're out there, thanks for this. He, during the, I would say probably late middle school and then going into early high school, Colin got really big into webcomics and web cartoons. And that sort of opened up me into checking a lot of that stuff out. That was also, it's funny, a lot of these rabbit holes also kind of like fed into each other. Like if you can imagine, like the rabbit holes being like this kind of like ant farm maze, like underneath, they all kind of bled into each other in different ways. So, for example, Colin discovered he was just on this giant binge of finding tons and tons of webcomics, like all over the place. And some of them would have animations actually built into them, like as like little, like kind of side parts and everything. Perfect example, and I'm not going to go too much into this for what might end up being probably obvious reasons, but it is an important part of kind of my history and everything. So he had found a little webcomic called The Rogues Gallery, which was done by a gentleman named Alan Sullivan. And Alan created, he would do Flash animations as kind of like little bonus comics and stuff here and there. One of them was a thing where his characters crossed over with the Mega Man Battle Network characters. And that was put on Newgrounds as like a way of being able to watch it and everything. So that was kind of part of the same era of when I was like, oh, I'm going to go on Newgrounds and find all these, cartoons and everything, as well as when I was reading the Rogues Gallery. That eventually led me to two important websites in kind of my history of doing stuff, which was the Fallout Shelter, which was a forum. That was the next kind of major message board that I had been to after TV Tome, where I was building the early stuff for TTA at the time, and gathering sprites and working with different artists and stuff like, and even some of the voice actors as well on that website. And it was tied to Fireball 20XL, which, without going too much into that, if you know, but it was a comic hub website that was kind of a common thing that was becoming to happen at that time for different places, where people would host multiple web comics on the same website. And there was a time where I had TTA hosted on there. I moved it from being on Newgrounds and DeviantArt to being on Fireball for a little while as well. So there was that. But that all kind of led from Colin being big into webcomics and introducing me. What was it? Not Tokyo Pop. There was like a comic that was associated with Tokyo Pop that I can't remember the name of, but it was like one of the first like American-made graphic novels that was about like anime type stuff. I think like the characters were otakus and stuff. The name of it is escaping me. I feel really bad, and then I got into like Flip Side, and then I was discovering other webtoons as well. Like Keen Spot was a site that had both comics and cartoons on it. That eventually led to me becoming obsessed with Bonus Stage. Which that was another sort of, and again, that was also tied to like the Newgrounds and like Flash animation stuff, but particularly webcomics. Jack was another one. That was a very adult, furry kind of webcomic about these characters that worked for Satan and stuff. They were based on the 7 Deadly Sins. Really cool story, very gritty and dark. I was reading that for I think at least a few years. Flipside I actually still keep up with to this day, believe it or not. So. That was certainly an era. Okay, this is a fun one. Actually, very fittingly related to something that just happened recently, and I was tweeting about this. So, I wish I could remember exactly how I found out about this. It might have even maybe been when YouTube was starting to become more commonly like a thing that people would, go on. But I remember when I first learned about the original Super Sentai shows that Power Rangers was based off of. And I'd found out about Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, or Dinosaur Soldier Zyuranger, which was the original Super Sentai series that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was based on. And I think around that time, around that time, that would have been mid to late 2000s, of course, so 2006 or so, I started doing the Super Freakin' Parody Ranger series, and I had definitely learned about Zyuranger at that time. I don't remember if I was able to actually find any actual episodes. I don't know if they were available readily at that time. But that was the beginning of learning more about, once again, it was a different show. Like what was the original one? Oh, wow, this story was potentially a little bit more interesting. Jumping ahead a little bit, it wasn't until I think the 2010s, I believe, that I watched with a friend of mine at the time through most of the show. We watched it was funny. We started off by watching the original pilot version of the first Power Rangers, and then the first episode of the actual show, and then we watched the first episode of Zyuranger with subs, and my mind was blown, and suddenly it went from like, oh, let's watch the Power Rangers episode and then the Zyuranger episode to see how different they are. And then after a while, we were like, you want to just keep watching Zyuranger and stop watching Power Rangers, because Power Rangers is kind of not holding up that well. And then meanwhile, Zyurangers is actually kind of awesome. So, and by total happenstance, I think a few days or so before I was recording this Kirblog, there was some YouTube channel that was streaming episodes of Zyuranger just looping infinitely, subbed. The Tokushoutsu YouTube channel was streaming all those. And I happened to tune in for the last 7 or 8 episodes of the show that I hadn't watched before. I knew some of the story stuff that happened during it. But so I finally watched the end of Zyuranger years later, just by happenstance. They were playing it. And I'm like, you know what? Why not? And I was crying every other episode. It was emotional. It was affecting me so emotionally deeply by that point. On a similar note as well, around this era in the mid to late 2000s, this is a big rabbit hole that has just expanded into my entire world at this point. One Piece. One Piece, I believe, was the very first show, and still to this day, I follow it every week. New chapter, new episode, every single week without fail. I got into the Japanese version of One Piece in the mid-2000s. I do remember actually going back a little bit on TV Tome, and I'll never forget, Cosmic Debris, if you're out there, bless you for this. I was introduced to what I was really missing out on, because of course it was still the 4Kids dub that was playing on TV in America at that time. I checked out the Japanese version of One Piece and started following everything from there. I watched all of the first 3 kind of major seasons, the East Blue stuff, and then the Baroque Work stuff, and then finally the Skypiea stuff. So 120 plus episodes of that show. I was, unfortunately and regrettably, I was torrenting them at the time. They were done by a fan subgroup, and I was, watching those. Some of the movies and other little spin-off things and stuff like that here and there I was watching. And then I remember on YouTube at the time, in Japan, they were airing the Water 7 and Enies Lobby episodes at the time. And this was back when people were just straight up putting entire episodes of anime just on YouTube without getting them taken down. It was long before there were bots to protect people from just straight up uploading entire episodes of shows illegally or whatever back then. And they would split them up into like 3 parts. So I'd be watching like Japanese subbed episodes of Naruto and Bleach and One Piece on early YouTube, like during my computer class at the time. And then eventually, when I caught up to where both the manga was and where the anime was, I was following both the new manga chapter, and of course, unfortunately, this was also back when it was scanlations, although I guess, what, I can't say unfortunately, because that was also before, long before the Viz manga official English translation was caught up to where Japan was. Now, the last like several years, we have, it really well where, they'll release these chapters simultaneously, when they come out in Japan, of course. But back then it was not so easy to do that when it came to the manga specifically. So I remember specifically it was around the time that in the anime, Rob Lucci and a bunch of the CP9 characters were first revealed, as well as in the manga, when the Straw Hats were kind of fighting each of their respective enemies from CP9 in Enies Lobby. That was around the time that I started keeping up week to week with where Japan was for both for where the anime and where the manga was, and following it week to week and keeping up with the latest stuff. And then eventually, of course, when Funimation got the show and then they went back and they were redubbing the old episodes and yada yada, then I was following, the dub, kind of behind from where it was, which was fine, and I'm still doing that as well. But yeah, and then since then, One Piece now I have followed, and thankfully now the great thing is I can do that from a legal perspective, is watching the subbed episodes week to week on Crunchyroll, previously the Funimation, and even previous to that, the what's it called? The One Piece official website, where I remember, I think the Sabaody Archipelago episodes was where they were officially, releasing the subbed episodes at the same time as when they were airing in Japan, and still do to this day. And even admittedly, I hate to say this, but sometimes I'll even peek on spoilers for like new chapters and stuff, just because I'm curious to see like what's coming next. And then of course I always read them officially on the Viz website and everything, the Shonen Jump website. I always make sure to do that, of course. But yeah, and then one last kind of funny late 2000s obsession, and this is another goofy one. Okay. So I'll mention this is another kind of separate Kirblog that I can talk about when it comes to, I think I did one actually about my obsession. I know, actually, you know what? No, I don't think I ever did. I think I did one about Silva Gunner, but not about Nico Nico Doga. Okay, so at the time, the VG Cats website, which is a big, actually kind of cornerstone of all these rabbit hole things, Scott Ramsumir was really good about finding like obscure little weird things to post on the front page of his website when new VG Cats comics would update. For example, actually, he was one of the people that kind of helped popularize Parody Rangers, because he posted whenever there would be a new episode out, he would post that on the VG Cats site, like a link to it on Newgrounds and stuff, which was very cool of him to do. And I remember one day he posted this one video. It was an automatic Mario World mod video. Again, long before Mario Maker, when people were just doing fan mods of Mario World stuff. And it was this auto Mario, like kind of roller coaster video. And it was him jumping around and in time with the music to this like 10 to 11 minute long medley of different songs from different things, most of which I didn't recognize at the time. A few of them I did. In fact, Rawest Forest was actually one of them that was mixed in there. Or not what I... Actually, sorry, I didn't realize it was Rawest Forest. It was just the Mario RPG Forest Maze theme. And I was like, this is cool. What is this medley? And somehow I found out what it was. it was a medley from a little website called Nico Nico Doga, which is a Japanese kind of YouTube-esque video site where many, 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 many memes were born. Because this was the late 2000s, this was after the point that I had posted Rost Forest in 2007. And unbeknownst to me, and a lot of people know this too, it was reposted on YouTube and other websites without my permission, because that's just what people did. And somebody posted it on Nico Nico Doga at the time. And it turns out it had this tremendous following in Japan for a while. And the reason that the Forest Maze song was in this medley was because they call them kumi kyoku, which I believe is a Japanese word for something akin to a medley, a musical medley. The Nico Nico Doga kumi kyoku medley, that's redundant. That's like Kamehameha wave. They had collected all these different songs from different memes that were popular at the time on there, and because Rost Forest was one of them, they included it in there. And I thought that was really cool, and then I started learning that there were all of these other different Nico Nico Doga medleys with different songs from these different video games and different anime stuff and different, like YouTube memes and weird obscure like Flash cartoons and live action clips of different things, all sorts of weird stuff. And I just got obsessed with them. And there was one dude, I think let me go see if I can actually check this. I believe it was Rintown. If I can still find their website. They created like actually even kind of like a wiki sort of site. Yeah, it's still up. Where they had chronicled all of the different medleys from Nico Nico Doga with all the different songs that were really popular at the time. And they also hosted actually all of these different medleys that people had different like covers, different versions people had made. Some of you may or may not know this, but I actually did my own versions of two of the Nico Nico Doga medleys, one of which I actually made like an animated music video too. And I had some guests on a few of them. I had like Kira Buckland and Josh Tomar and a bunch of folks involved with a bunch of those, and we sang some songs on that. And I later, many years later, with Silva Gunner, I did a newer version of that was a bunch of Silva Gunner memes, which we put on there too. I did a version, and it was hosted on this website that had all of these different Nico Nico Doga medleys. And at the time, I've talked about how I used to work for this company called Eduware. It was my one and only like kind of day job that I had over the summer for a few years, where I was doing graphics and animation and stuff for different educational software for this one company and tutorials and things like that. And at the time, that was my biggest source of listening material was those medleys, because I needed stuff to listen to, and they were all long. I mean, for Christ's sake, there were some of them that were like 25 minutes. There was one that was like Nico Nico Monogatari, I think was the name of it, or something like that. So many of them. And they would, I would learn more and more about what some of these songs were. And further down the rabbit hole, as like, for example, one of them, quite a few of them used songs from Jam Project, which I'm now a huge fan of. If you guys aren't familiar with that band, it's a bunch of amazing anime musicians, including the singers of the Dragon Ball Z original openings and the Pokemon Japanese openings, who's also the voice of Satoshi or Ash. They have this band together and do all these crazy, amazing songs. Some of them have been in like Super Robot Wars and stuff like that. So I would look up, that's also, Nico Nico Doga is how I learned about Vocaloid, because there were a lot of Miku Miku, Hatsune Miku songs that I learned about because of those. So that single rabbit hole of Nico Nico Doga medleys opened up like 10 more of them about like Japanese video memes and like all these other, like different things that I had not been aware of before until I listened to all of those. And that just became this really cool source of, new listening material, more music for me to listen to in the background while I was doing all my animation work at the time. And that was kind of a cool thing and it helped me keep sane while drawing, preschool-esque characters for these Edgeware things and everything. So moving into the 2010s, the early 2010s, I was in the midst of college by this point, and different things were starting to intrigue me in different ways. Only a few here, but some funny ones. at some point in the midst of college, I guess for whatever reason, they were not taken down by, whatever company, I forget what company owns Thomas the Tank Engine, but people had uploaded like entire seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine, the old episodes, up on YouTube at the time. And I remember when I was in the midst of college, I was going back and rewatching, and I actually do this like once every maybe like 4 or 5 years or so, I think. I would go back and I would watch all of like probably the first like 3 or 4 seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine. And it feels almost like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like a sleep ASMR type of thing, because especially when Ringo Starr was the narrator, it's very like, very calm, and like Thomas and his friends went down the rail and and so I think that was also I think that usually each time I would go back and rewatch those episodes, I would have another attempt at like, I'm gonna draw the Thomas the Tank Engine characters like anthropomorphized into like anime dudes and like make them into like these kind of like robot like train Gijinka type characters or whatever, because I've done that like at least 3 times. Which means I think that's probably been at least the number of times that I've been like, yep, time to go back and rewatch all these Thomas episodes again. And I think that also that was a big point where I was becoming incredibly intrigued, probably more than ever, by the behind the scenes of how the stuff that I grew up with was created and came to be and, constructed and everything. That was really, really a big thing for me at the time. And so I was looking more into, and there were a few websites out there that chronicled a lot of behind the scenes information, and like there were like documentaries and news reports about how they created these Thomas the Tank Engine episodes, building the models and the sets and filming stuff and writing some of the news stories and working with these different people. And I thought that was very cool. So I was learning kind of more about that, and that was just as interesting to me as watching the show itself. And on a similar note, this is another thing kind of like with One Piece that hasn't really gone away, because I will still go through this and shit, is learning about like the beta material for video games, stuff like the cutting room floor, people diving into like data dumps. I was used to, by that time, and this doesn't happen anymore, thankfully, but at the time there was a thing where I think probably up until Gen 5 Pokemon, every time a new Pokemon generation would come out, and the initial games would be released, people would dig into the data and release the entire list of what the new Pokemon were, including like whatever the new legendaries were going to be. That would typically be like, okay, they're probably going to end up being like a talking legendary Pokemon that will be featured in one of the movies or something like 2 or 3 years from now. So, like, everyone knew what Arceus was, quite a while before the Arceus movie, where you could, and then whatever, like, giveaway event where you could actually get Arceus downloaded onto your cart and everything, that kind of thing. That was, and so that was one kind of easier example, because everybody kind of, documented everything with Pokemon. But, a big mystery, in particular, and I've talked about this with some of the interviews that I've done with a couple of the people that have worked at this company. But my fascination with a lot of the rare games, stuff like the Banjo-Kazooie pair of games and Donkey Kong 64 and a lot of that stuff. And people showing screenshots and early like pre-release footage of like old builds of the game, with like levels that were changed and like a temple test level that turned out to be that when it was cut, they didn't actually include that or anything. A lot of that kind of stuff. That was so cool to me. And there was stuff like Unseen 64 and Beta 64, kind of websites like that. Those are kind of the early, and then, now we have stuff like the, Liam Robertson and Digino Gaming and a lot of these kind of people that will really chronicle this stuff. And now even the cutting room floor, which, I still, even now I go through and I'll check out, like, just for the novelty of it. I'll see like, files that are left over in game cartridges and things like that. I love that stuff. That was actually another big inspiration for some of the stuff that, in terms of like my interest in making games as well. I think that the intrigue into that side of things led a lot into it, and I'm very thankful to a lot of the people on the internet that have gone out of their way to chronicle so much of this information and all this stuff in the first place for us to know about it. because it wasn't so easily accessible back then. It was not, you really had to dig, you really had to do a lot of research, you really had to like, and then be able to put it up there and share it with people in the first place. Like, it wasn't an easy thing to do. So I'm very thankful that we have a lot of people that were so dedicated to, do that kind of thing in the first place. Then, actually, another one that I'll mention here briefly, there were many shows that I would follow, as they came out at the time. There weren't a lot of series that I would follow as subbed anime, like as they were coming out, because most of the time I would wait for the dub to release and then just at the time buy the DVDs and collect those. I wasn't like really downloading fan subs anymore, but there was one series that felt really special, and because it was not like, other like subbed anime experiences, it was a little bit more of an obscure thing, is Wakfu. I discovered Wakfu kind of in the middle of college, and can't remember exactly how originally I found it, but I remember seeing the Brotherhood of Tofu, the main 5 characters, and loving them immediately. I loved the way that they looked, like all their designs and everything. They were super, super cute. And then somehow I found like some kind of fan subbing group that was doing the original series, the first 2 seasons as they were coming out. This was well before they put the series officially up on Netflix, and now they're up to they just announced they're doing a 5th season of the series now, which is incredible. And I thought that was amazing, and I was just so entranced by this beautiful show that I was just blown away at the limits of how they were pushing, being able to do certain things in flash animation, stuff like that. And I have not watched the most recent, the 4th season, but I saw that they announced a 5th season very recently, which is fantastic. And I actually recently met and worked with somebody who worked on the original French version of Wakfu, which was a tremendous honor for me. I was very, very happy about that, and I was gushing to them a lot. And it's funny because now, once in a while, when I meet people that were a fan of that show and followed, actually, my friend Marcy, who is the voice of Eleli, one of Dali and Eva's 2 children in the 3rd season, they're a big fan of the show. They were actually watching it back in the day. I think Kira, actually, even Kira, who played Eva, I think she said she even watched some of the show, and she said that Eva was the character that she always really wanted to voice as well. So, and actually, it's funny. Toxic Soul 77 just recently did because me and her and Jerem have been watching through Delicious and Dungeon, and she did a TikTok recently about Chilchuck and drew Chilchuck in a bunch of different outfits, including Yugo. And most of the comments were, "Oh my God, you know who Yugo is?" And I'm like, that makes me happy that people know what Wakfu is, like, for Christ's sake. Because at the time, it really was kind of one of those things that you had to go down a rabbit hole to find. It was not readily available, and now the fact that more people do know what it is, that makes me happy because it's such a good show and should be shared with the world. So I'm very happy about that. Late 2010s. So by this time, this is where it's going to start to peter out a little bit in terms of how many rabbit holes I went down, because by this time, a lot of digging for information became incredibly easy. It sort of shifted into like video essays and like, kind of special interest sites, iceberg, documentary type things that people do, like all these kind of chronology. There's so many more resources and so many more knowledgeable people, that now, and like, platforms to put all this stuff on. It's easier than ever to go down rabbit holes, in not such a like really having to dig kind of way. It's just there. It's just all kind of out there now. And so that's why I say, like, for example, stuff like, the cutting room floor that has all this stuff about video games that I grew up with, and, digging into that. I can just be like, oh, I've never looked at the cutting room floor page for this game before. Oh, what's left over in the data? What are all these things that I can check out and everything? And that's always kind of a cool thing to see. There's only a couple other, like real rabbit holes I went down that were like, really extreme kind of things. Silva Gunner was one, and that was also kind of an interesting thing with like learning more about the people that, worked on these things, and eventually meeting the community behind Silva Gunner that does all this different music and everything. Eventually getting to work with a few of them like MTH and Chase and Nick. And I still, to this day, even as I've been writing through the new game project that I'm working on right now, I've been listening to Silver Gunner music while I work. So that's certainly been one thing. And I really like what those guys do, and I'll sift through a bunch of memes and find some bops and add those to my little playlist of Silver Gunner music and everything. And then another one that kind of dove into the 2020s is VTubers. It started with Korone playing Banjo-Kazooie and Ikabokam and all that stuff, and then kind of opened up into her playing Try Not to Explode with Callie, and then I discovered all of these other HoloLive VTubers, and then all the other brands, and all the VShojo people, and FaZe Connect, and all the independent ones, and all that stuff. Got really big into that, was watching just so many of them. There's quite a few that I tune into, every once in a while now. Just to tune in and see whatever the hell they're up to, just for fun, and from all over the place. And I'm constantly discovering new ones. I know we just had the announcement of the Hollow Justice as the new generation of VTubers that happened recently, and that was a big score, of course, which was very cool. And a lot of that stuff, which was I'm also still following at this point. I've gotten to meet a few VTubers as well. They're all really funny people, and then it all comes full circle with the rabbit hole stuff. I've been teasing on a bunch of my live streams, and I think maybe on some previous Kirblogs. I can't quite remember, but I'm currently working with Did You Know Gaming on doing a documentary about Mario RPG, and diving into a lot of the obscure behind the scenes information and lost stuff and in development stuff and beta stuff and all these different things. And the combination of resources with translating old news articles and interviews and digging into the data on stuff like the cutting room floor, and most of all, getting to actually speak with and interview some of the original developers of the game to learn new things that we didn't know before. Is not only a rabbit hole that kind of twiddles my special interest, part of my brain, but it's also a big honor to actually get to do something creatively fulfilling and cool when it comes to something that I'm passionate about, that inspired me creatively as well. I'm really grateful that I get to be part of stuff like that. So all in all, this journey of research and out of passion, or at least some level of like funny interest, it's really helped kind of define a lot of what I've done. It's shaped, I think, a lot of my kind of particularities and interests with the types of stuff that grabbed my my attention and made me want to jump down these rabbit holes in the first place, to dig for this kind of information, to become as knowledgeable, and to be able to share that information, with other people in turn. Like, I love getting to, like when I'm seeing people or hanging out with people, when I discover something interesting and I get to share with them, this is, this happened because of this, and this is why this is, and etc. I'm really glad that now it's easier than ever for anybody to be able to do stuff and make these new discoveries and things. And once in a while you get, like the Giga Leak and, or like just, a new interview about something where we learn a lot more cool stuff. And I love that. And I'm still glad that I get to do it. And with that said, I'm very curious, to those of you who have listened to all 45 minutes of this or so, what are your special interest kind of rabbit holes that you've dove down and research that you've learned about? I want to know. Tell me some stories about things that you've and give me like an obscure, like, secret little factoid that you learned about something that you were really interested in, that was cool to you. Like, that's the stuff that was really interesting to me. Leave a comment on the video with some information like that. I would love to hear some other kind of interesting stories, maybe even some of the same stuff that I got into that I had mentioned, some of these different things. I would love to know. And once again, if you would be interested in voting on and suggesting Kirblog topics like this, patreon.com/Kerbifer, please be sure to check it out. And of course, at the time I'm posting this, the Kirblog plushie is also for sale currently. So if you want to head on over to makeship.com/products/Kirblog-plushie, they're in a limited amount, and they're going to be going up until July 5th. If you would like to buy one, please. I would love to. I want to see people like record themselves like throwing them across their rooms or something, or punting them across football fields. So that's it. I'll have some more stuff happening in July. I'm going to continue to try to stream as much as I can. I might have even streamed shortly before I posted up this video. Who knows? But thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Carilla Stromboli, for making this suggestion. And we'll see you all on the next one. Off I go into the next rabbit hole. Whee!